So, Nero, the man responsible for the first Christian persecution and possibly even the Roman fire. Nero is one of my all-time most favorite Roman emperors. I've spent hours dedicated to research and study into his rise, his fall, and his impact. He is by far one of Rome's most infamous Roman emperors, and in this speech I will go over his rise, his reign, and his impact. Nero had by far one of the worst childhoods you could think of. Nero's father was probably the root of all of this, but it's important to note that the family beforehand wasn't all that bad. However, in a 2004 book edited by Thomas Forrester named The Lives of the 12 Caesars, Volume 6, Nero, Suetonius wrote, "During his attendance upon Caius Caesar in the East, he killed a freeman of his own for refusing to drink as much as he ordered him." This is like the least his father possibly could have done, though. It is after he was released from Caesar's presence, he, in a village, on his chariot, whipped his horses faster on purpose and ran over a child. The child was recovered in pieces. He then took a knight's eye in the middle of a city for an argument. He cheated out silversmiths and gladiator competitors, and then when he became praetor, which is kind of like a person in office and power, he promised to push for a law that would allow them to be reimbursed. Never happened. When he was finally acquitted and put on trial, they also tacked on incest with his sister, adultery, and treason. However, before he could be put to death, Nero's father died of a case of dropsy, and then Nero's mother remarried. She remarried the Emperor Claudius, who made Nero his heir over Claudius's own son. This was a huge thing, and it made his son very, very angry. Nero did end up poisoning his son and killing him, though. Eventually, Nero is put under the tutor Secna, and is then raised in all things war and emperoracy. And eventually, he marries Octavia, Claudius's own daughter. Then, one day, at the end of Claudius's reign, he mysteriously dies. It's suspected that Nero's mother poisoned him so Nero could become the emperor. After Claudius's death, Nero became emperor at the ripe age of 16. It is important to note, however, that his mother, Secna, who was his tutor, Burrus, who is the commander of the army, held most of the power in his early reign. Nero's popularity was due to tax lowering, supports of the arts, and entering secret trials. Nero supported the arts so much that he considered himself an artist. It's been numerous reports. There has been Nero playing the lyre, singing, dancing, all of the artistic things in public. This is controversial because back then, artistic professions were considered a lower class profession. Nero sponsored architects and buildings all over Rome, and in fact built the Golden House, which is part of the reason of his fall. Nero also was an Olympian, and he participated in the Olympics and chariot racing and drinking and singing and all of that fun stuff, and every time he, of course, won. However, though, as Nero grew older, he began to resent his mother's control, and that's where his ruthlessness came into play. In a 2018 website labeled Nero by Paul Legousse, he wrote, in AD 59, he murdered his mother, and AD 62, his wife, Octavia. This was after he began to resent his mother's control and wanted to be able to do things in his own way. He believed his wife and his mother were conspiring against him to put on another emperor. After the Roman fire, which burned down half of Rome, there was a rumor that Nero started it to get land for his Golden House, which was one of his projects. The Golden House was a giant, elaborate building with a rotating ceiling, gold leaf everywhere. It's basically everything you could imagine in a Roman house. Nero did not like that he was being accused, and in response, accused the Christians and persecuted them. This is known as the first Christian persecution. And so, after long, extensive riots and plots to overthrow Nero, he commits suicide at the age of 30. Nero's last words were reported to be, "When an artist the world is losing in me." Nero's lasting impact shattered the world. A Across most of the dynasties, Nero comes back and puts his little fingers into everything. However, it's mostly known in the Flavian dynasty, which is the dynasty right after his, that they have spent the entire time of that dynasty fixing what he did. However, any time they tried to fix anything, one glaring problem was the way that they have treated their women. In a 2022 book by Mark Hiernick and Esther Meiser, in this narrative, parricide, incest, adultery, and other sexual transgressions constitute an interesting mixture, and these are exactly the ingredients that will make a reappearance. This is proved as the following emperors make the same mistakes that Nero did towards their mothers, their spouses, their children, any women in their life. Nero is one of history's most infamous emperors. His lasting impact is still talked about today. For example, in the Bible, it is possible that he is alluded to as the Beast. Nero will still be talked about in history for as long as we can remember, just because of everything that he did.
Little one to